Get out of my sight! Damijo's voice echoed through the private hospital hallway in Ikoyi. The sound was sharp. It cut through the air like glass. Nurses stopped walking. A man holding flowers froze in place. Even the security guard at the door turned his head slowly. Kunle stood there in his old navy shirt, the same one he wore when he used to drive Damijo's black Rolls-Royce through the streets of Victoria Island. His hands were shaking, but he did not move. Damijo was lying on a hospital bed, sweat running down his temples. Tubes were attached to his arm. His once expensive suit had been replaced with a thin hospital gown. Yet his pride was still loud. "You came here to laugh at me," Damijo spat. "You poor man. You think I need your pity?" Kunle swallowed. His voice was soft. "I did not come to laugh, sir." Sandra stood by the window, her designer handbag resting on the chair beside her. She looked uncomfortable. She had never seen Damijo like this before. Not weak, not afraid. Kingsley, Damijo's lawyer and closest friend, stepped forward. "Damijo, please, calm down. The doctor said your blood pressure—" "I do not need lectures," Damijo shouted. He turned back to Kunle, his eyes burning. "You were my driver, just a driver. Do you remember how I found you? You could not even afford rent in Surulere. I gave you food, I gave you clothes. Without me, you would still be begging for transport fare." The words landed hard. Kunle's face tightened, but he did not argue. In that moment, something inside the room felt heavy, thick, like rain before a storm. Damijo tried to sit up suddenly, but his chest tightened. A sharp pain shot through him. His breath became uneven. Sandra gasped. "Damijo!" The heart monitor began to beep faster. Kunle moved without thinking. He stepped forward, steady and calm. He pressed the emergency button on the wall. His voice changed, firm, clear. "Sir, breathe slowly. Look at me. Do not fight it." Damijo looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since he entered the room, not as a driver, not as a poor man, but as someone who was not afraid. Doctors rushed in. Kunle stepped back quietly. As they pushed Damijo toward the intensive care unit, Damijo's eyes never left Kunle's face. And then the doors closed. Sandra turned to Kunle slowly. "Why did you come?" she asked in a whisper. Kunle did not answer immediately. He stared at the ICU door. His eyes were full, but he did not cry. "I came because he once saved my life," he finally said. Sandra frowned. "Saved your life?" Kunle nodded. "But he does not remember." The hallway fell silent again. Outside the hospital window, Lagos traffic moved as usual. Cars honked, people shouted, life continued. But inside that hospital, everything was about to change. And Damijo did not even know it yet. 3 years earlier, Damijo was at the top of Lagos. His mansion in Banana Island had white marble floors that shined like water. His cars lined the driveway like trophies. He owned oil contracts, real estate, and a chain of luxury hotels across Abuja and Port Harcourt. People stood when he entered a room, and Damijo enjoyed it. Kunle first met him on a hot afternoon in Surulere. The sun was harsh that day, the kind of heat that makes your head spin. Kunle had just lost his factory job. His mother was sick. Rent was overdue. He stood outside a mechanic workshop when Kingsley pulled up in a tinted SUV. "Are you Kunle?" Kingsley asked. "Yes, sir." "You can drive?" "Yes, sir." "Follow me." That was it. No interview, no long speech. Kunle found himself standing inside Damijo's grand living room later that evening. Damijo walked in slowly, adjusting his gold wristwatch. "This one?" Damijo asked Kingsley, barely looking at Kunle. "Yes, clean record, quiet type." Damijo looked at Kunle from head to toe. "You will not embarrass me, will you?" he asked. "No, sir." "You will not smell like poverty inside my car?" Kunle blinked. "No, sir." Damijo smirked. "Good. Because I hate the smell of struggle." The words stayed in Kunle's mind for days. Still, he worked hard. He arrived early. He cleaned the car himself. He drove smoothly, even in Lagos traffic. But Damijo never missed a chance to remind him of his place. One afternoon in Victoria Island, Damijo stepped out of the car in front of a 5-star hotel. Business partners were waiting. "Kunle!" Damijo said loudly, making sure everyone could hear. "Park properly. Last time you parked like a bus driver in Oshodi." The men laughed. Kunle forced a small smile. Later that night, as they drove back to Banana Island, Damijo leaned back in his seat. "You people do not understand wealth," he said casually. "You think driving for me means you are close to success." Kunle kept his eyes on the road. "Do not forget," Damijo continued, "I am the tree. You are just the shadow." Silence filled the car. Yet something unexpected happened weeks later. On a rainy evening along 3rd Mainland Bridge, a reckless truck swerved into their lane. Kunle reacted instantly. He turned the wheel sharply. The car spun but stopped inches from the edge. Damijo's head hit the seat hard. For a moment, everything was quiet, except for the rain hitting the windshield. They were alive. Damijo stepped out, shaken. If Kunle had hesitated even 1 second, they would have fallen into the lagoon. Damijo looked at him differently that night. "You drove well," he said, simply. It was the closest thing to praise Kunle had ever received. After that incident, Damijo increased his salary slightly. He even paid for Kunle's mother's hospital treatment when she was rushed to the emergency room months later. But Damijo never let him forget who was powerful. He would give with one hand and insult with the other. At parties in Lekki, he introduced Kunle like this. "This is my driver. He was struggling before I rescued him." Rescued. The word hurt. Still, Kunle stayed loyal, until the day everything changed. It happened during a business meeting in Abuja. Damijo lost a major oil contract to a rival company. Investors began to pull out. Banks started asking questions. Damijo's temper grew worse. One night, after too much wine, he called Kunle into his study. "You are still here?" Damijo asked coldly. "Or have you found another rich man to follow?" "I am here, sir." Damijo stood up slowly. "You know what I hate about poor people?" Kunle felt his chest tighten. "You all wait for someone to save you." Damijo stepped closer. "But when the table turns, you disappear." Kunle looked confused. "Sir?" Damijo threw a file across the room. "Get out. I do not need you anymore." Just like that. No warning, no gratitude. Kunle left that night with one small bag. He walked past the large gates of Banana Island for the last time. But as he stood outside, something inside him felt steady, not broken. He whispered to himself, "One day, sir, you will understand." And now, 3 years later, Kunle stood in the hallway of a private hospital in Ikoyi. The same man who once laughed at him was fighting for his life. Sandra sat down slowly on a plastic chair. "You said he saved your life," she repeated softly. Kunle nodded. "Yes, but he also destroyed something in me." Sandra looked at him carefully. "What happened after he fired you?" Kunle took a deep breath. His answer would change everything. And inside the ICU, Damijo's condition suddenly worsened. Machines began to beep wildly. Doctors shouted, and Kingsley ran toward the door in panic. Something was very wrong. The ICU doors swung open. A nurse rushed out, her face pale. "We need consent for emergency surgery now." Kingsley's hands shook as he signed the papers. Sandra stood frozen, her fingers pressed against her lips. Kunle did not move. He just watched. Through the glass window, he could see Damijo's body on the hospital bed. Oxygen mask. Wires. Doctors moving fast. One of them pressed hard against his chest. The beeping sound became long and sharp. Sandra's voice cracked. Is he— No, Kingsley whispered. No, he is strong. But strength can be loud in boardrooms and weak in hospital rooms. Minutes felt like hours. Finally, the doors closed again. Surgery. Silence returned. Sandra turned slowly to Kunle. You never answered me. Kunle exhaled. After Damijo fired him, Kunle did not go back to Surulere immediately. He slept in a cheap guest house near Ojuelegba that night. The room smelled of old paint and damp walls. He stared at the ceiling fan that barely moved. He felt shame, anger, but also something else. Freedom. The next morning, he sold the only expensive thing he owned, his wristwatch, a gift from Damijo after the accident on 3rd Mainland Bridge. With that money, he traveled to Ibadan to see his uncle, who owned a small transport business. I want to learn, Kunle told him. Learn what? His uncle laughed. You have been driving luxury cars. You want to drive buses now? Yes, Kunle said. It was not easy. The buses were old. The seats were torn. Passengers argued about change. Sometimes they refused to pay. But Kunle learned about people. He learned how to speak calmly when someone was angry, how to fix small engine problems, how to save little by little. Months later, something happened that changed everything. One evening, a young woman boarded his bus. She looked weak, sweating. She fainted halfway through the trip. People shouted. Some stepped away. Kunle carried her out of the bus himself. He drove her straight to a nearby clinic. The doctor said she had a serious heart condition and had missed her medication for weeks because she could not afford it. Her name was Sandra. In the hospital hallway, Sandra listened carefully. I did not know it was you, she whispered. Kunle nodded. You were very sick. You did not remember. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. You paid the hospital bill. Yes. How? Kunle hesitated. I sold my uncle's spare bus. Sandra's mouth opened slightly. That bus was your chance to own something. I know. Why would you do that for a stranger? Kunle looked at the ICU doors. Because someone once paid my mother's hospital bill. Sandra felt something heavy in her chest. Inside the ICU, Damijo lay under bright lights. The surgeon worked carefully. His heart was weak. Stress, poor diet, years of pressure, but the real damage was deeper than arteries. In the hallway, Kingsley returned from a phone call. His face was gray. The bank has frozen his accounts, he said quietly. Sandra blinked. What? Investors pulled out this morning. The news is already online. His company shares dropped. Everything is falling apart. Kunle closed his eyes, briefly. So this was the table turning. The mighty man who once said, I am the tree, you are just the shadow, now had no shade. Sandra looked at Kunle with new understanding. You could walk away right now. Yes? You owe him nothing. Kunle thought of the insults, the laughter at parties, the word rescued, but he also remembered the rainy night on 3rd Mainland Bridge and the hospital bill for his mother. Humans are complicated. We hurt. We also remember kindness. Suddenly, the ICU doors burst open again. The surgeon stepped out. He survived the operation, he said. Sandra gasped in relief. But, the doctor continued, his recovery will be long and expensive. Very expensive. Kingsley swallowed hard. There may not be enough funds, he admitted. The doctor looked confused. He is Damijo. Kingsley shook his head slowly. Not anymore. The hallway became very quiet. Sandra looked at Kunle. Kunle stared at the floor. Then he lifted his head. I will help, he said. Kingsley frowned. Help how? Kunle's voice was calm, steady. I built something after I left him. Sandra's heart skipped. What did you build? Kunle did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. It was a bank statement. Kingsley took it. His eyes widened. This This cannot be right, Kunle finally spoke. I own 3 transport companies now, and a small logistics firm in Apapa. Sandra stared at him in disbelief. You are wealthy? Kunle shook his head gently. No, he paused. I am comfortable. Through the glass window, Damijo's eyes slowly opened for the first time since surgery, and the first face he saw was Kunle's. But this time the power in the room had changed, and Damijo knew it. His lips trembled. And for the first time in his life, he looked afraid. Damijo woke up slowly. The room was quiet, white walls, a faint smell of medicine. His body felt heavy, like someone had placed stones on his chest. He tried to move his hand. It trembled. For a moment, he did not know where he was. Then he remembered the shouting, the hallway. Kunle's face. Kunle. He turned his head, and there he was, sitting beside the bed, not in a uniform, not standing at attention, just sitting, calm, watching. Damijo's pride tried to rise again, but it felt weak, like an old engine that would not start. You are still here? Damijo whispered. His voice cracked. Yes, sir, Kunle said gently. The word sir sounded different now. It was not fear. It was respect. Chosen, not forced. Damijo closed his eyes. He felt something he had not felt in years. Small. Outside the room, Kingsley and Sandra stood quietly. They were talking in low voices. The press is asking questions, Kingsley said. They know about the debt, about the failed contract. Sandra nodded. And the staff? Most of them have left. Sandra looked through the glass at Damijo. He does not know yet, she said softly. Inside, Damijo looked at Kunle again. I heard accounts frozen, Damijo muttered. Kunle did not lie. Yes. And the company? Investors pulled out. Damijo stared at the ceiling. For years, he believed money made him untouchable. He believed power was permanent. He believed poor people stayed poor because they were lazy. Now he could not even sit up without help. He let out a slow breath. Do you feel satisfied? He asked suddenly. Seeing me like this? Kunle was quiet for a long time. No, he said finally. That answer confused Damijo. I mocked you, Damijo whispered. I called you poor. I told people I rescued you. Kunle nodded slightly. Yes. And now you sit there. With money. With businesses. Damijo's voice shook. You built what I lost. Kunle looked down at his hands. I built slowly, he said. One bus at a time, one driver at a time. I listened to them. I remembered how it felt to be spoken to like I was nothing. Damijo felt a sharp pain in his chest, not from surgery, from memory. He remembered Victoria Island, the laughter, the word shadow. He swallowed hard. I was afraid, Damijo said suddenly. Kunle blinked. Afraid? He asked. Yes. Damijo's voice became fragile. I grew up in Ajagunle. We had nothing. My father was mocked every day. When I became rich, I promised myself I would never be that small again. He paused. So I made others small. The words hung in the air. They were not loud, but they were heavy. Kunle felt something shift inside him. Anger, yes, but also understanding. Humans hurt others to hide their own scars. A nurse entered the room briefly to check Damijo's drip. She smiled politely at Kunle. Family? She asked. Kunle hesitated. Yes, he said quietly. Damijo heard it. Family. The word almost broke him. Later that evening, Sandra entered alone. She sat on the other side of the bed. You need to rest, she told Damijo gently. He looked at her. Why is he helping me? Sandra did not soften her words. Because he is not you. Damijo closed his eyes. Outside the hospital, news spread quickly. Social media posts, headlines, rumors about bankruptcy. The same people who once waited hours for Damijo's attention now ignored his calls. Kingsley returned with more bad news. The house in Banana Island may be seized, he said quietly. Damajo's fingers tightened around the bed sheet. That house, he whispered. I built it to prove something. To who? Kingsley asked softly. Damajo did not answer, because he did not know. The next morning, the doctor explained the truth. Your recovery will take months, he said. You cannot return to work immediately. Stress could kill you. Damajo nodded slowly. After the doctor left, silence filled the room again. Kunle stood up. I need to go back to Apapa this afternoon, he said. I have drivers waiting. Damajo felt panic rise unexpectedly. Will you come back? The question surprised even him. Kunle looked at him carefully. Yes, he said. Why? Damajo whispered. Kunle walked closer to the bed. Because once, on 3rd Mainland Bridge, I almost made a mistake. You trusted me with your life. That night you did not insult me. You said I drove well. He paused. That mattered. Damajo's eyes filled. Small kindnesses matter, even when pride tries to bury them. Kunle turned to leave, but before he reached the door, Damajo spoke again. Kunle, he stopped. I am sorry. The words came out broken, imperfect, real. Kunle did not smile. He nodded once and left. As the door closed, Damajo felt the weight of everything he had done. The laughter, the harsh words, the arrogance. Now the man he once mocked was the only one standing beside him. And deep down, Damajo realized something terrifying. If Kunle chose to walk away now, he would have nothing left at all, not money, not power, not even dignity. And outside the hospital, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. 3 men stepped out. They were not doctors, they were not friends, and they were asking for Damajo. The 3 men did not smile. They wore dark suits, but not the kind you see at weddings. Their shoes were dusty, their faces were hard. Kingsley met them first in the hospital lobby. We are from the bank, one of them said plainly. We need to speak to Mr. Damajo about the loan default. Kingsley swallowed. He just had surgery. This cannot wait. Upstairs, Damajo was trying to sit up without help when Kingsley entered the room quietly. Damajo saw his face and understood. They have come, he whispered. Kingsley nodded. They want repayment, immediately, or they begin legal seizure. Damajo stared at his weak hands, the same hands that once signed contracts worth billions. Now, they could not even hold a glass of water steady. Sandra stood near the window again. She felt the weight of it all. The hospital bill, the frozen accounts, the staff who had vanished. It was as if the world had erased Damajo in 1 week. The door opened, the 3 men stepped inside. Damajo looked smaller in that bed, the oxygen line, the bandage on his chest. The tallest man spoke first. Sir, your outstanding debt must be addressed. The Banana Island property is already under review. If payment is not made within 48 hours... Damajo raised his hand slowly. Stop, he said. His voice was not loud. It was tired. For the first time in my life, he continued, I do not have the power to fix this. Silence. The men exchanged glances. And then... The door opened again. Kunle walked in. He had just returned from Apapa. His shirt sleeves were rolled up. There was dust on his shoes. He did not look like a billionaire, but he did not look like a shadow either. Kingsley stepped aside. Kunle walked toward the men calmly. I am Kunle Adewale, he said. I would like to discuss settlement terms. The men looked confused. Who are you? One asked. Kunle answered simply, family. Damajo felt something break inside him, not in a painful way, in a freeing way. Kunle pulled out a folder. I cannot cover everything, he said honestly. But I can pay part of the hospital bill. And I can negotiate structured repayment through my logistics company. We will not let him lose everything. Sandra looked at him in disbelief. You are risking your company, she whispered. Kunle shook his head gently. No, I am investing in a human being. The tallest man looked skeptical. Why would you do this? Kunle did not look at Damijo when he answered. Because wealth without mercy is empty. The words settled in the room like soft rain. The negotiation lasted an hour. It was not easy. Voices rose, papers were reviewed. But in the end, the men agreed to restructure the debt. The house would not be seized immediately. Damijo would not be dragged into public disgrace. Yet. When the men finally left, the room felt lighter. Damijo stared at Kunle. Why? He asked again, his voice shaking. Kunle walked closer to the bed. You once told me you were the tree, and I was the shadow, he said quietly. But trees fall, and shadows disappear at night. He paused. What remains is character. Damijo's eyes filled with tears. He did not fight this time. I made you feel small, he whispered. Yes, Kunle replied. I laughed at your poverty. Yes. I fired you without gratitude. Yes. Damijo closed his eyes. And you still came back. Kunle's voice softened. You paid my mother's hospital bill when you did not have to. You trusted me on the bridge. You gave me a starting point. He inhaled slowly. You hurt me, but you also helped me. Damijo began to cry. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet tears from a man who finally understood. I was afraid of being poor again, he admitted. So I became cruel. Kunle nodded. And now? Damijo looked at the ceiling. Now I am afraid of losing the only person who still sees me as human. Sandra turned away. Even Kingsley wiped his eyes quickly. There was no applause, no music, no sudden miracle. Just two men in a hospital room, one once powerful, one once powerless, now equal. Weeks passed. Damijo recovered slowly. He could walk again. He could breathe without machines, but something inside him had changed. He no longer spoke loudly. He listened more. He visited Kunle's transport yard in Apapa one afternoon. No cameras, no announcement. He watched Kunle speak to his drivers with respect. No insults, no humiliation, just guidance. Damijo felt ashamed and grateful. One evening, as they sat outside the yard watching the sunset behind the busy road, Damijo spoke. I spent years building wealth, he said, but I never built relationships. Kunle did not answer immediately. The traffic noise filled the pause. Money can return, Kunle said softly, but trust is harder. Damijo nodded. I want to earn it back. Kunle looked at him carefully. Then start small. Damijo smiled faintly. Small. The word no longer frightened him. Commentary and lessons. This story teaches that pride can make a person blind. Damijo was not evil at heart. He was wounded. He carried fear from his childhood in Ajagunle and covered it with arrogance. Kunle was not perfect either. He felt hurt. He felt anger. There were nights he wished Damijo would fail. That is human. But when the table turned, Kunle chose mercy over revenge. That choice changed everything. Sometimes the people we mock today may become the hands that lift us tomorrow. Power is loud. Character is quiet. And when everything falls apart, it is not your money that stands beside you. It is the people you treated with dignity. Damijo learned too late that respect is not given by wealth. It is earned by kindness. And Kunle proved that true success is not measured by how high you rise, but by who you help when they fall. Thank you for listening. What is your view about this story? Let us know in the comment section. Kindly like, comment, and subscribe to our channel.